Hey guys, this is Brent LeBlanc, and today we're going to go over how to texture this little prop that I did here using Substance Painter. And originally what I was going to do for this was I was going to scan this box and show you how I use my polarization and stuff like that, because I had just gotten some polarization film. But I actually went ahead and did scan it, and after I scanned it, there was so much cleanup to do, and I was like, "Why did I scan this? It's literally a box." So, I just decided to hand model it actually. So it's a pretty simple model. The scan was useful because I had done it first, just so that I could get my proportions and stuff like that. But I really didn't end up using it for anything other than that. So I am not the greatest modeler in the least. I'm not an authority on modeling or much of anything, honestly. But I'll just show you how I approach this because I don't have anybody to make props for me. So I had to do it. The translation from Painter to Arnold was pretty good. So I was happy with it. All right, so let's move on to some of my information gathering. So getting the initial images. So when I was first starting this, like I said, I was going to scan it. So I put it up in my studio here and just took photographs of it like I normally would for a scan. And I did use my polarization filter on here, even though there is some a little bit of specularity still there bleeding in. But the polarization definitely helped get more diffuse and keep the color pretty uniform without getting much glare. So I just took some photos like this, and then I ended up just using just the side views to create most of the textures in my Painter file. What I wanted was like a template of each side of the box, just so that I could take a look at it and then paint down things that I saw directly onto the model inside Painter. And this is the finished version. And I just want to go over a couple really useful things that Painter has. So let's get this base material. So I actually broke this in. This is like extremely overkill for a prop this size. I actually have 3 tiles. So I have a tile just for the hardware. And this is totally not necessary, but I just wanted enough resolution for like a high res still at the end. And then I have a tile just for the bottom and then a tile just for the top. And I just did 4K instead of 8K. Okay, so when I was breaking this down, I was thinking like what I would start with was just a base wood material. So it's just the simple base wood material, wood walnut smart material over here. Let's see if I can. I think is this one here. This one's one just comes with Painter. So I just drag that in there, and then some of the pieces had to be rotated because how it's aligned on the mesh, like this piece here. So by default, it just comes in rotated a certain way, and you can go in here and play with all these values. But you can go in and you can actually change the rotation of, let's see, the wood fibers, I think it was. Oh, I guess this is the one that was not rotated. So I rotated this one. So I think it was, yeah, the wood pattern here. And there was a couple other channels that I went in there. And so you can see over here, they have some parameters that you can mess with, some of the things that are built into it. So I started with this as my base. And then after I had that, I wanted to go in and paint. And the reason that I'm getting like these dark fills and things like that is because this is not really a how to use Painter introduction. Like you should kind of like go to the algorithmic website and you can get tons of tutorials on how to do all that. So I have already baked out all of my maps from my high res. This is actually already high res. I didn't even do a low res version because this is not for a game. So I just baked using the normal settings for high res or whatever. So that's how I'm getting these areas here, because it's occluding when the hardware is turned on, it's occluding those areas, causing that dirt build up or something. Okay, so this is like just what I got out of the box. So what I wanted to do is take some of my scanned data that I got over here, and more just photographs, whatever, and use those to project down onto my box. So let me turn off some of my masks. Okay, so what I did was I used the projection tool. So I just like created a layer, just a normal layer like this. And I use the projection tool, which is right here. And what you can do with this is at the bottom, it has all of these inputs. It has base color, height, roughness, metallic, all the channels that you're going to need. So what you can do is you can actually import your own textures in here, which are the ones that I made earlier, like this flower diffuse. So I'll pull that in. And that's just the map that I made here in Photoshop. And then I took the flower height, which I made in Photoshop as well. And let's see, I think I used this one, and the flower roughness. And the reason I did that is because I want to be able to paint all of these at the same time. And you can, there was two, actually the way that I did it was I used these as a tileable, and then I painted down the template that you saw earlier. So let's see, let me pull that in. All right, so I'm just going to pull this in, just do my current session. All right, so this wood box template, you can hold down S and middle mouse and drag it around, or scale it, or rotate it, however you want to use it. And what I did was I went into orthographic mode, which like kind of flattens out the focal length so that you can see it as like a flat shape. And then I just took this tool, and on one of my layers, I just started painting down this information. I'm just going to make a new layer here and just paint this down so you can see what I was doing. So I just took this texture from this bottom panel here, and I just painted it down like this. And this is like way oversaturated. I ended up knocking this down later. And right now I'm only painting color directly onto, because that's the only channel I have active actually. Now it's the only channel I have active. All right, so yeah, you want to make sure that you have the only channel active that you want to be painting with, because then you'll just be painting different information in there you maybe not want. But you can always go into the channel later and delete it. Okay, so now I'm just painting color, and I just painted this down and like went through that whole process of getting this, getting that painted down. And that's like just the way that I got this like rough paint pass. And I wanted to chip it away as well. So here, let me get rid of this. So this is very poorly painted right now. You can see there, all those other channels were active. We won't worry about that right now. I'll just go to base color. So we're just looking at base color. Okay. So this is the very roughly painted version of that. And what I did was I added some generators to it. to mask out those areas. So you can do is like paint a white mask so that it'll just cover the entire thing. Let's see, and then I'll do it. What it does is it just completely white just keeps it exactly how it was. Black will make it disappear entirely, but I just did that so I could see it. So that I went in here and I think that I used like a stain and scratches. I think I used that one. Let's try that. All right, then I'm just going to drop it into my mask for that painted layer. And go over this mask generator options. And let me invert that. Okay, so then you can start pulling around these settings a little bit. And I have this currently at 4K, so I'm going to put this down to 1K just so I get a little bit faster feedback. Let this load down here. It looks terrible like that, but that's just because it down-resed everything to 1K, but it's live, so I can always, in Painter, you can modify layers and masks as much as you want to at very low res, and when you go up to the higher res, it automatically up-reses because everything is like a vector shape or something. It's doing some crazy resolution voodoo. I don't know how it works, but it's awesome. Okay. So I get some really fast feedback. And I can just mess with this generator a little bit to be more about what I'm looking for. Kind of some edge wear. That's the curvature. Hold space normal. And this will just give you a starting point. And you can go down these other settings here. So now I've got this paint that's painted down, which it still has my original paint that I put there, but now it has this generator, and this is pretty aggressive. I probably didn't go this far. And what you can do is you can add a bunch of things, but I can add a paint layer on top of everything I'd already done. And I can go in and like pick one of these brushes. Let's see, like a dirt brush. And you can just go in and you can paint areas out or paint areas back in. So I'm going to just up-res. All right, so back to 4K. And you can just paint areas out or paint areas back in, however you want to do it. All right, so that's a basic idea. So I went ahead and I did that entire process. So I have this little layer here called Scan Project Texture. And this is what the projections look like with no breakup yet. So I did it originally came in extremely red like this, and I should have fixed it in Photoshop, but whatever, I didn't. So I just did a little HSL layer and just like decrease the saturation. You can see over here, decrease the lightness and the saturation, and then shifted the hue a little bit. So that layer's like that. And then on top of that, I added a generator mask. So, which was that scratches one that I showed you earlier. So it reveals some of the bare wood underneath. And then I went in and I started painting in some layers I like painted areas back in where areas were removed, and then I removed in other areas that would make sense. Like where this hardware is, it would swing up this way when you open it. And if you did that a bunch of times, I just imagined that this would be scraping, like you would either rub it with your hand or rub it with this this little hinge. So it would eventually wear away that paint. So whenever you're texturing, you'll want to think about that. Think about areas where it would bump up against something, or if it was exposed to water, you would kind of want to try to figure out where water would pool and then where rust would gather, things like that. So you always kind of think of that. You just don't want to just randomly put stuff everywhere. You want to, put it where it would make sense and like kind of try to tell a story with your texturing, so that, it just feels more believable when there's a reason for the wear to be there. So I think I didn't really end up using that very much. But then let's see, painted in, okay, this here. So I did a similar effect here. So I can actually view this mask. So this mask was to do the same thing. It was to paint out this flower area, so that I could, you know, make it feel like a little more believable. Like it would like carried through the same idea. Like this thing swings up and scrapes the top of this like flower thing to reveal this wood underneath. And then just getting rubbed or dropped, or this handle hitting here, and just like scraping it in different areas. But what I did for this layer, this was actually not, I didn't use the projection tool for this. What I used was a fill layer, and then I put in my tileables that I made earlier directly into those channels. And so I put the base color, the height, the roughness, and then a little bit of the metallic. I use a metallic one as well, to make these little flowers like a little bit like a metallic paint or something like that in the final material. This HDR that I'm using in here in my painter file is not, it doesn't really give you a good representation of what the final look was, because I modified these maps a lot in the actual render as well. But anyway, so this fill layer just has these tileables, and then I can actually change the scale on the fly, and it's just going to tile that texture as many times as I want. And I'm just cutting it out using, here, let me get that back to us. That's about what I had. And you can use this offset and the rotation and however you want to use that. So it's just a little tileable there. So another thing that I did was I only wanted to call it out on this top piece. And remember, I'm only working on this one right now in this layer stack. So I wanted to call out just this top area with this like flower pattern. So I just filled it over on the entire thing. Whoops. Oh. I filled on the entire thing, and I think there's a way to turn the mask off. There we go. Okay. So that's just turning it off momentarily. So you can see that it just filled the entire thing. And then what I did was I used the, see, I think it's the Polygon fill tool. And then I went to UV chunk fill. And what that'll do is I can, in my my 3D and 2D view, I just clicked this as the only white area so that it masked out. You can see in that little thumbnail here, the entire tile is black except for this top left-hand corner, so that it's masking out the, here, I can actually probably, oh, you can see here this doing the polygon fill. So there I just filled that inside shape, but I actually don't want that. So I'm going to hit X, which will turn on black mode, and then it'll just turn that off again. So you can mask out stuff really easily with this polygon fill tool, which you can do UV chunk, you can do mesh, polygon, or triangle fill. So if I just select this whole thing and I just did it like that, now this whole thing is covered. And then I just wanted to, if I hit X again, it'll turn black. It'll give me a black, you can see over here, it goes from white to black. Then I can just select those UV chunks that I don't want in there. You can just quickly mask it like that. I'm going back to 3D only. Okay, so, and that's what I did for this top part. And then I just added a additional layer of dirt, which was just, you know, out of the box, the dirt smart material that's over here. This one, and I just messed around with the settings. You can just go in there and see what all these settings do. You can change the color, you can change different ways that it reacts and its coloring and everything like that. It's pretty cool. And then I did a dust layer as well, which is just like a little bit of dust on the mostly on the top portions, but then like some of it on the side and stuff like that is kind of coming through as well. Okay, and then let's see, oh, that was the layer I just did. Okay, so then I'll turn these back on and I'll go to this bottom layer, and I just did the same workflow for this bottom part. So I just added those 2 walnut rotation smart materials. That's loading real quick. And then I just went in and I did this same thing. I just painted those different panels using the same like fill method, and then doing projection painting. And this here is actually, I painted a height map. Let's see, let me go to height. For these little like nubs, because like if you look on the original image, there's these little like wooden carved things, and I could have definitely done a better job at this, but I just like really quickly painted in these little nubs, and it actually worked for my use. See when I turn this off. And for that flower pattern, it actually has a little bit of height to it as well. So if I go to height, you can see it a little bit. You can't see it that good. Maybe normal. Okay. In the normal, you can see it. All right. So then I just painted the height in, and then I added another dirt layer like I would do in the other one. And then I did a dust pass and a dust detail. And then for the hardware, I think that I just did like some of the preset bronze and the worn copper, and I just went in and I messed with some of the settings here, and I just made it pretty dirty looking, and then kind of oxidized, and you don't really get too close to this, but see this like little gold handle or whatever, and then I added some dirt to it as well. And to export these out is like once you're finished out, you just go up to File and export your textures, and you can do these configurations. You can use these default ones, or you can make your own. For this one, I wanted to bake my ambient occlusion, my curvature, my thickness out so that I could use them in Arnold. So I think I used, for the color and all those other maps, I think I used Arnold 5 standard, this one. And it bakes out my base color, metalness, roughness, normal, height, and emissive. I didn't use emissive, so it just doesn't bake it out because I don't have it active or anything. So it baked out all 5 of these maps. And what you can do is you can go in here, you can pick the resolution you want to bake it at. This resolution I use is probably overkill, but it's fine. So I just made it a TIFF and whatever format you like to use. A friend at work was telling me that EXR is the one that's most color accurate, but TIFF was fine for me. I could just modify it later. Oh, it looks like you can do 32-bit in TIFF. I didn't know that. Okay. So I just baked that out, exported that, and just put it into the folder you're going to use, and then we're going to jump over to Arnold. And let's just take a look at my Hypershade. Honestly, it was a pretty easy network. I didn't really have to do too much crazy stuff. The lighting took a little bit of time, but I was just, messing with it to make it look good. But so all I'd had to do is just bring in the base color and the metalness map and the roughness and then the height. And I don't think I'm really using this height as it's intended, because I didn't get, it looks okay, but I had a lot of weird artifacts going on with this. So I got to figure out a better way to use this height bake. I probably need to use a higher bit rate, or I don't know. Like the height just doesn't translate very well into Arnold. And if you know what I'm doing wrong and there's some blaring mistakes in here, please leave it in the comments, because I'm learning just like everybody else. So if you know something I don't know, please let me know. All right, so, and then I just did all these maps, and then I just did some color correct nodes. Let's see. I initially I didn't like how dark these little flowers were. So I actually wanted to bring this out a little bit. So I brightened it up with this color correct node here. And then I used my metalness map as and I think I flipped it. Yeah, so it was it looked like this. And then I did a color correct and just turned it into a control signal pretty much. And then I mixed this base color and this lighter version into this version. So you can see I just lightened up these a little. I could have done that in Painter, but I honestly, once I get into Arnold, I like to do as much as I can in Arnold, just because I like to play around with stuff in real time. So you can see it's just, I brightened up those flowers just a little bit. And then for the metalness, I think I just crunched up these values. And let's see, I think I just slightly brought it down. And for this roughness map, I just turned the roughness into also a spec range as well. So I just took this roughness and then did a roughness range, just pushed around the values till I liked it. Let's see if I can the specular direct. Yeah, just push those values around until I got it to a place I liked. All right, and then that was for this one here. And then I did these metal pieces, and it was just like a similar workflow. It was just bringing in these base colors and stuff like that. I wanted to modify this material a little bit differently than I did the wooden box. So I just used all the same maps. I just carried over the same ones actually and just plugged them straight in. I didn't have to bring this in twice. And then just made like a range and then the similar workflow what I did before. And then also what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring in like a dirt grime pass to the overall thing. So I took my thickness information, and I could have broken this up a little bit better with some more maps, but I just took this dirt grime and I mixed it with this metal to make like a slightly dirtier version. So this grime is like starting to move into the cracks into the metal. And I did the same thing for the wooden box actually. So I have this dirt grime here, and here's my wood box with no grime on it. And then I used an ambient occlusion and just clamped the occlusion a little bit to add like a layer of grime. It's like a little bit subtle. And then I also did a dust pass as well. So here's my dust material, and then here's my wood box material. And then I mixed I think it was a normal signal with just the Y direction. And then I had a noise, and then I just did a range on that, and then just like combined this noise pattern and this Y vector into a range that mixes this dust and this wood box. So you can see on the top here and on the edges here and around. It's a subtle thing, but it just adds a little bit more to it. So this is before, this is after any dust and grime, and this is before. You can see it's just a little bit cleaner. So it just adds like just a little bit more detail that I didn't get out of the painting directly. And you can see here, this was the final result. All right, guys. So if you had any questions or anything that I left out or that you were interested in seeing, or if there was any errors, please let me know down in the comments. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe so I can make more of these. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.